for joining me today for a walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching a series of garden shows with a little cooking thrown in on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. We're filming today in my garden, as we usually do, and it is the end of March, and we have just come through 3 or 3.5, if you want to count, nor'easters that have dumped a lot of snow and, more importantly, a lot of branches, small branches, twigs, sticks, leaves, all kinds of junk all over the garden. I'm standing in the rose garden, which I had not cleaned up yet because of the cold weather and the snow. But hopefully our forecast is going to improve with temperatures in the 50s and hopefully maybe even the 60s in the next couple weeks. So it's really time to clean up. April is probably my busiest time in the garden because it means a lot of cleanup work and planting. And already we can see some signs of spring. The thyme is starting to show some green. It tends to be kind of evergreen, but these look like some new shoots. Sorrel is starting to come. It's one of the earliest things that you can consume from the garden, along with chives. And we have a group of chives up here. I did rake those out a little bit. And they will be coming up soon. I try to get at the things that are coming up earliest first. There is some rhubarb in here that should be appearing shortly. It's probably down under here somewhere. Here it is. Some little green shoots, just barely starting. And other things will follow. There's also some onions back here. These are a perennial onion, a top onion, Egyptian onion, and they're also starting to grow. There are also some foliage. Last year we planted some saffron crocus, and the foliage comes up now, but it doesn't bloom until fall. But it's starting to put on some good foliage. We'll hope that we can keep the chipmunks out of it by using the wire cage that we put in last fall. Anyway, my job will be mostly with my rake and my wagon in the next couple weeks, and we'll get the herb garden cleaned out, and hopefully we'll see some progress the next time you visit with me. I'm going to move over to the perennial garden now. A lot of spring bulbs have started to come up. I have quite a few daffodils. They probably should be divided this year. Whether I'll get to that or not, it's hard to say, but we may try after they bloom to dig some of them up and spread them around a little bit. The tulips and hyacinths are also starting to come up, which means I'm also out with my deer spray. Nothing pleases the deer more than some fresh little tulips just starting to pop out of the ground. And here are some right here. There are a few that I noticed came up when I wasn't looking, and they already have a few bite marks. I have more tulips over this way, and I can give them a good shot, again, of deer spray. I also had a little problem with some rabbits on my asters. Once these are cut down well and are coming up well, I will cut those off. The rabbits tend to eat the foliage on the grape hyacinths somewhat, but it doesn't seem to bother the blooms. I do spray them anyway. Again, daffodils, the deer don't like. They are toxic to them, I believe, or well, they don't taste good, one or the other, but they won't bother daffodils, which is a good reason to plant more daffodils and fewer tulips, unless you want to be out all the time with the deer spray. Again, here's a bunch of the grape hyacinths that have been nipped a bit by the deer, so we'll give them a good spray. More tulips, and even more tulips back here. I go out about once a week and spray them. You don't necessarily have to, but new things keep coming up, and that's why I spray. You'll notice I'm leaving the baskets on for a while. After the number of nor'easters we had, the plants, the lavenders that are under the basket, I'll be taking those off once the temperatures kind of settle in. They will be okay down into the 20s, but I'll wait until daytime temperatures are in the 60s and the nighttime is in the 40s, at least not going below freezing every night. And then I'll take off the baskets. I have a few tulips here. Again, you can see some deer nibbles. If you have deer, you'll find the nibbles. The other thing that will nibble is rabbit. And I know we have some rabbits here too. I have seen them several times. This spray will work for both deer and rabbits. Again, this all needs to be cleaned up now that spring is here and things are starting to grow. As we move over here, this area has been cleaned up. And I got in here early before the last 4 snowstorms and did get it cleaned. And I've been, again, spraying that. Sometimes the tulips are hiding under there and you don't see them. So it's good to get the leaves off of areas that you know. There's some crocuses that are just starting to bloom here. This could use a second raking, but by and large I've cut back things. Another thing the deer like would be the tall sedums. The sedum autumn joy. I think they must think it's deer cabbage and they just eat it by the mouthful. They'll take big chunks out of it unless you spray it. And again, another tulip coming up. There are a variety of bulbs in here, some of which the deer don't like, others they do. I've had no trouble with hyacinths, but I suppose some people probably do. A hungry deer will eat just about anything. You can discourage them or put up a huge fence. I tried discouraging them with the spray. The vegetable garden is still under snow in some areas. I'm not even going in. It's full of brush, which is going to be burned as soon as we get a nice day to do so. I have the time and the wind is down. You'll notice over here, you can possibly see the green sprigs coming up. The garlic that we planted in the fall is starting to make an appearance. And I'll just leave the mulch right there on the garlic. I've marked it with a flag. And we'll leave that, and I need to clear out a space in the near future for the strawberry plants that will be in the mail shortly. I ordered those from Co-op in Maine, and I expect 50 strawberry plants to arrive probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So before then, I need to get in and get a spot ready for them. Hopefully we won't have any more snow to contend with. And I do have this area of the garden that I can use for the berries as they come up. I have a lot of plants that I've ordered, and again, they will start coming. If the weather isn't sufficiently warmed up to set those plants out, I will be able to keep them in a cool spot, probably my garage, until the weather is such that I can put the things out. They save pretty well. Some of the bare root things need to be watered or perhaps put into a pot temporarily if you can't get it right in the ground when it arrives. Now let's head out to the back for just a few minutes. One of the things I have been able to do is to clear out the pots that I had Christmas greens in, and also my window boxes. I've left some of the redwood dogwood, and I also have a little solar light in the window box, which gives a little light in this area in the evening. But I have cleared it out and it's ready to be planted. When the pansies come into the nurseries, I will probably put a few pansies in the boxes and also in the flower boxes until other things can go in. A lot of the cuttings I took last year will go in these boxes, but they won't be able to go in until probably late May, early June. So I needed to clear it out, and I'll put something in it just for a little color along the way. I really like pansies, so they usually are something I do put in. They go nicely with spring bulbs as well. We do have a little more spring out back. We do have a little bit of spring coming up here with the snowdrops and the crocuses. You can see there's a lot of snow. I have a lot more of the crocuses under the snow, and they're starting to peep up their heads here and there in the snow. Once we get a warm rain this weekend, this area will be a sea of crocuses, little blue crocuses. These are the early crocuses. There are two kinds of crocus. The early ones are smaller, But they do come early and they spread like crazy, which doesn't bother me a bit because they spread, they bloom, and then they go away. And they're really cheerful in the early spring. The second type are the type that bloom a little later with a bigger bulb. There is some crossover if you have a really sunny spot, and I have some up by my porch door, which we'll look at on the way into the house, and they are already starting to bloom. If they're out in the ground, out in an open area, they'll bloom a little bit later out here, but up near the house they are a little warmer and they'll bloom early along with the quote early ones. The pond has the ice out of it at this point. Here's one of the hellebores that's already in bloom. Hasn't quite fully opened, but it will. The ice is out of the pond. I've been scooping it out. My garden shed survived numerous tree branches, and it warms up a lot in the sun, but it gets cold again at night. I will put a few things out there early as a trial and see how they do. Some of the things, for instance, lettuce that can take a cooler temperature, I will put out there and see if I can get some starts going. Probably put them in those planters for a while, or even into the garden if I can get them to start. If you start lettuce in the house, it tends to be too warm, and then it will just become leggy and go to seed really too fast. Now let's go into the house and do a few little craft items for the coming Easter holiday. You ready? All right, this little area is between a brick walk and some windows, and it really never gets really cold. Some things survive here all winter if we don't have too cold a winter, but things are always quite early coming up. This is one of the early crocuses, and it's almost finished blooming, and the later crocus is now in bloom, full bloom. I have some tulips in here, which will be out in the next week or so. And again, I like to put a few pansies in with those tulips. And there are some daffodils in here as well. This group of daffodils has been here about 20 years, and they are kind of petering out. So I think it's time to lift them and divide them, and perhaps add a few new ones next fall. So that'll go on my list of things to do later on this fall. But I think I probably will lift them this spring and make some room for some annual plants, and then plant them again in the fall and see what happens. Spread them out a little bit. Let's go in now and do some crafts. I've been really busy doing some planting. You possibly noticed in the garden all of the milk jugs that were out there, or water jugs that are cut and filled with seeds that hopefully will be sprouting in the next month or two. A lot of them are perennials. There are a few that are vegetables and a few annuals among the group of seeds, but we look forward to seeing those start to sprout as the temperatures warm up. Once the temperatures are reliably in the 60s and 70s, which will happen fairly fast in April, on selected days, I can remove the covers from those milk jugs and just tip them back and then put them back over at night when the temperatures cool down. But I'm still planting, and right now it's time to plant some broccoli, and this is the one I'm going to put out in the shed and see how it does out there. I've had little luck starting broccoli in the house. It tends to get too leggy too quickly. By the time you transplant it, it's too tall, and I'm hoping that this will slow it down a little bit by putting it in the shed. I've already started some in a milk jug outside. We'll see how that comes up. And I'm going to try some in my garden shed. It'll be warm during the day and then cooler at night. So we'll see how it works. I'm using a seating system where there's a wick over a platform and there's water in the under layer. And I'm going to turn it around so that there's a little indentation where you water it later on. And I'm going to put potting or germinating soil in this. I use two different kinds of soil. One is called a germinating soil, which is very fine, and the other is a potting soil, which is a little coarser. But the germinating soil is sterile, and you don't have weeds coming up in it, which you certainly don't want. So you need to use a purchased soil to start things for best luck. And again, we'll just fill it. And I'll take my little super green broccoli seeds and put about 2 into each little compartment. Once they come up, I will remove one of them. Usually I have pretty good luck with germinating, so we don't put in too many. We want eventually 1 per pot, little compartment. And I don't even want to put 12 broccoli into my garden. I'll probably share it with someone. And I'm going to cover, just barely cover those seeds. A good rule of thumb is about 3 times the size of the seed. And as seeds go, these are fairly large, so you can cover them with maybe 1/8 of an inch of soil. And push them down so they have good contact. And then, in order to keep the moisture in, to keep them germinating, get them germinating, I'll put the cover on and label it. I've found that if I don't label things right when I plant them, I suddenly have a lot of seedlings and I have no idea what's coming up. So it's good to put green super broccoli. This is a hybrid, which I believe is supposed to be quite early. And I'll put that right on the front of the container. And then this container will go over on my heat unit when there's space, just until they start to peek through the soil, which will probably be in 4 or 5 days. And then they will go out to the garden shed. I'm going to do this, use leftover containers from last year's annuals and put those into a watertight container and plant some lettuce. I'm going to plant some red lettuce and some green lettuce. And again, I just want to get it started. And I'll put a few seeds in each one. And this too is going to go out into the garden shed once it starts peeking through the soil. I can cover this with a piece of plastic and again put it on the windowsill if I don't have space under my lights. That was the green one, and now we'll plant some of the red sales. This will be for an early crop. We'll be putting some out in the garden itself, but the soil out there isn't nearly warm enough yet to plant seeds. It still has snow on it, though it may not be frozen too deeply. It's too cold, and they will just rot if they go in too early. So there, I have these ready. And again, we'll put those either on a sunny windowsill with a piece of plastic, just until they peek through, and then they'll be able to go out into the garden shed. And I'll put a label on those too. Lettuce. I'm going to be using my glue gun later, so we need to get it warm. If you have amaryllis that's already bloomed and don't know what to do with it, hopefully you haven't thrown it out yet, just cut off the bloom stalk and get rid of that. And then the rest of the plant can be watered. Continue to water and fertilize it. And then when summer comes, put it outside in a sunny spot and let it grow. Just kind of forget about it, let it grow. Repot it after it's rested in the fall. In the fall, the leaves will die back a bit as fall approaches. And then bring it inside, keep it dry, repot it, and then Start watering it in about December, and you'll have amaryllis again, hopefully in December. Sometimes it doesn't bloom the second year, but it will bloom subsequent years. This year I had 2 that bloomed, 3 that did not, that are a bit older, and sometimes they'll even make a second amaryllis bulb that you can divide off and replant. Now I'm going to make a few Easter decorations, and I'm going to start with a wreath for outside. And if you watched the show that I did in February, I decorated this wreath for Valentine's Day. Well, I took off the Valentine's flowers and decoration and ribbon, and I'm going to decorate it for Easter. And what I'll do is start with some Easter lilies, and these are not real ones, because again, it is too cold and they would not last at all. So we're using some artificial flowers and some wire. And I'll just fasten it to the wreath. You want to fasten it rather tightly. Probably in several places. And then I'll add a nice spring bow, and it'll be ready to go out next to my door, just in time for Easter. It already has a little hanger on it that will fit over the nail by the door up at the top. So this will go outside next to the front door and stay for the Easter season until it's time to put up something else and look a little more like spring. Next thing I'm going to make is another wreath. And this one is for inside instead of outside. And what I've done is taken a little heart-shaped wreath. And this one was not an expensive one, and you can still see some of the wire. So we're going to cover that up a little bit. But I have put just an old gnarly stick across it. We have plenty of those out in the yard right now. So I cut one of the ones that had a little bit of lichen on it. And I want to make something that looks a little rustic, but not too. So using the glue gun, I'm going to add a few pieces of moss here and there on it. And just kind of, there's some wires that show. So if I can glue some of this on to cover some of the wires, we'll do that. Just a little here and there. And up in here. This is a type of purchased moss. And I'm just going to spot it around a little bit here and there. Again, this one has some extra wires and loops. that I'd just as soon cover up. And then I'm going to add a few other things to it as well. And I grew straw flowers a couple years ago and saved the flowers, so I have quite a few of those that I can put in. Some of them have a little stem to be removed. Now it's working well. And I have some strings to pull from the glue gun. There's a nice one. And one more over here, I think. Straw flowers are fun to grow, and I have started some. I hope they do well. And I'll have more next year. I've got that part done. And now I want to add one other thing. And that will be 3 little chickens sitting on my log. And they glue on pretty easily. These are just little craft store Easter chickens. Make sure the glue holds. And there we have a little Easter wreath for inside. And I have a hanger on that. You could also, if you wished, make the stick a little longer and tie some sort of loop to it, a ribbon or a loop. I didn't think a ribbon really needed to go on a wreath that looks more rustic. So, and you can use different pods, different cones. If you have little pine cones you want to put in, you could also add those to it. Acorns, anything you have, just to give it kind of a little natural look. And that's our wreath for inside. Just it over here. And the next thing I want to do is make a centerpiece. And I'm going to start with a wreath, and I'm going to make a nest. And I'm using just a wreath form. And then I'm going to be really messy. And add some grass that I've cut. These are some of the grasses I have outside, and I'm just going to pile some of those in and around. Maybe even a few leaves here and there. They came with it. This is one of the ornamental grasses that will need to be cut back. I just cut a little bit of it to put in. A few more pieces that I'm not going to use. And then I also have some vines. This is off of a Dutchman's pipe vine. And I'll try to curl some of that into the wreath itself. We're making a nest. And these are really tangled up. trying to act like a bird, see how a bird might make their nest. Should be easier for me. I have thumbs. It's amazing how birds do build their nests. If you find a nest, they're really an interesting thing to see. Okay, we've got a few vines in, and now I'll take some sphagnum moss and make the center of the nest. And again, tuck some of these pieces in here and there. And then I can add a few cones here and there. Some acorns here and there too. And if you want this to be more permanent, you can glue them in. I'm going to probably take it all apart later, so I'm just going to arrange things on it. I have a few little dried roses. I'll stick those in too. And again, a few straw flowers. Perhaps, or perhaps not. Just a few. And again, I'm using, straw flowers come in a variety of different colors, but I'm staying with some of the paler ones at this point. And there we have an Easter nest, but we need to put some eggs in it, which is what we're going to do next. I'm dyeing Easter eggs with natural colors. And these are some that sat overnight. And I used two different ones. I did some red onion skins and some beet juice. Now the red onion skins I haven't been quite as happy with. They look a little muddy to me, but actually they look more like bird eggs, so they might be. And what you do is you take your either your onion skins or about 1.5 cups of shredded beets, and you put them into a pan with water, and for each quart of water you would use 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. You boil that mixture, and you can also use red cabbage, parsley, spinach. These are the ones with the beets. Again, I did beets and red onions this year. I did red cabbage last year. If you soak them for less time, you get a lighter color. And I've done some of them over here. And these are lighter colors that we have. And I also did some that were blown out. These are all hard boiled. And these are the ones that I did last year with the red cabbage. Red cabbage turns out blue eggs. And those are the ones I think I'll add to the nest. And this one was saffron. So we got a yellow egg. And then just regular brown eggs and white eggs. Put another blue one in. Okay. Maybe just 3 eggs in our nest. And the blown eggs, again, in the nest will last, so I can leave it on the table for a while. So that'll be the centerpiece that I have on the table. These eggs, once you take them out of the solution, they do need to dry well before you put them in someplace. Again, these do look like bird eggs, if you've ever found bird eggs. So even though they're quite dark, they do look like them. This one was a white egg that was in the beet solution earlier, and it's a lighter color. I think I like it a little better, just a pale pink color. Okay, one more thing to be done, and that is an arrangement to go on the front step. And I have a planter. I've put a paper towel in the bottom to keep the soil from going through it. I'm going to unplug my glue gun while I'm thinking of it. And I'm going to put some real plants in this one. A tulip, a daffodil, and a hyacinth. The daffodil and the hyacinth can then be planted outside once they're finished. You can plant those and they'll come up again next year. The tulip probably not, although I may try it just to see if it works. Also in the arrangement, I'm going to use some forsythia that I've picked. I've been picking forsythia for a month or so to bring inside, and in the warmer temperatures, it will bloom. It's a good way to prune your plant and have some early blooms inside. And I'm going to stick one of these in the back of the arrangement and then put my tallest plant in and just scoop out a little spot for it. You can see it has quite a good root ball. And I'll just put that in with the forsythia behind it. The next one will be the tulip. You can see that the roots are already around the pot. We'll separate those if I decide to plant it later. And again, and the hyacinth. Let's make a nice little spot for that. Oh, that has real good roots and lots of them. This is a pink hyacinth, so we have a variety of color in the little arrangement. And the last thing I'm going to do is set it in a basket. And perhaps put another piece of forsythia in. Over on this side. The forsythia, by the way, may root in the pot while it's in there. If you keep it watered, it will root, and then you can plant it someplace else. Forsythia roots very, very easily. And then the last thing I want to do is put a little moss around this to kind of hide the pot. And I'll use a green moss on this one, just kind of around the edge, in it and around the edge. If I'm able to get pansies, I can add some of those. This is called sheet moss. And it's usually in fairly large pieces that you have to kind of pull apart. I just want to fill it in a little bit around the edges. And yes, it's messy. A few more little sprigs. As this is, it will expand a little as it gets moist. And I'll water it when I put it outside. And if I wish, I can also add some of the blown eggs. Just a couple. It's a little accent. I've sprayed one of the blue ones. And I'll put that out on my front steps. I have a little garden ornament that's a rabbit. And I'll be putting that out with it. I can rearrange this moss to kind of fill in around the edges of the basket. There's a little outdoor porch decoration. Again, hopefully we can pull this out a little bit so that it covers the edge. A few eggs in here. If I'm able to get some pansies, I will also put those in, just as a little accent down in front, instead of the eggs after Easter's over. Now I'm ready to go into the kitchen and do a little Easter baking. Join me there. Today I'm going to make two side dishes that would go very well with ham if you're having a little Easter buffet. And one is sweet potato and red onions with bacon and cheese. And we're going to start with that. And what I've done is made the crust already. And I used just pie crust. And if you wish, you can use purchased pie crust. And the hint given in the recipe that I followed was if you're using purchased crust and it comes with 2 in a package, you roll the 2 together to make a larger crust. And they would like you to have a large pan. I've also then pre-baked the crust at 425 for about 12 minutes. And I put foil in it with some dried beans in order to keep it from puffing way up. It puffed in at the sides a little bit, but it will work. And I've also pre-cooked roasted sweet potato and red onion together in a little olive oil, and I used a little seasoned pepper, lemon pepper on it, and that roasted in the oven for, check my time again, about 10 minutes until the potatoes are tender. And then again, 10 more minutes after you've turned it. So these are roasted sweet potatoes with red onion. And let's see, before I start putting it in, I want to add 6 strips of cooked crumbled bacon and 1/4 cup of parsley. And that's chopped flat leaf parsley. Again, I keep a jar of flat leaf parsley in the refrigerator. In a glass jar, it will last for a very long time. And I'm going to put about half of the sweet potato mixture in. And then add about half of 2 cups of grated Swiss cheese, Gruyere, or I used Jarlsberg. And it's 2 cups, and we'll spread that out. And we'll repeat those layers again. And spread out the cheese. This could be a main dish, or it could be a side dish to go with ham. And then the next thing we want to do is make a mixture. I've got 1.5 cups of half and half, and I'm mixing in 4 eggs. And I'll add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and about a 1/2 teaspoon of crushed rosemary. It calls for fresh rosemary, but it happens to be out of season here at this time, and I did not choose to buy a package. Usually I have it, but I lost my rosemary plant this winter, so I don't have fresh rosemary to use. I'm going to pour the custard mixture over the top. It's going to fill it right up. And you'll notice I've put a pan under it. I like to be out in the garden rather than cleaning the oven in case it goes over the top. So I always put things on a baking sheet just in case. And this goes in a 350 oven for about 30 to 35 minutes. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is to make a dish with asparagus, which is a nice spring vegetable, and some ravioli, which I'm going to put into my boiling water right now to cook and hope this is fresh ravioli, and it kind of stuck together in my bowl, so we're hoping that as it cooks it will divide itself a little. It's a ricotta and parsley stuffed ravioli. And the next thing I'm going to do is put 1/4 cup of oil in the frying pan. This is a pretty quick dish. And 2 cloves of minced garlic. And we're going to cook the garlic until it's just starting to brown a bit. Gets a little more out. This again is the garlic that we harvested last late summer, and it's still going. It will soon be time to bring in any that's left and freeze it. Separate the cloves and peel them, and then mix them with a little tiny bit of olive oil and put them in a jar to freeze. You don't want to make garlic oil and try to keep it very long, because it can be very dangerous as far as botulism goes. So garlic oil made at home is not a good idea. Commercially, they process it such that it's not dangerous, but it can be. I'm going to add 1/2 cup of walnuts. These have not been toasted, and we're going to accomplish that right now in the pan with the oil. Stir that around for 3 or 4 minutes till the garlic and the walnuts are both a little toasty. I used to have an asparagus patch. Unfortunately, a new septic system took the place of the asparagus patch, and I have not grown it since. It takes several years before you get a very good crop, and I was just starting to get some nice crops of asparagus, and we had to make the change. So I have to purchase my asparagus, and you should start finding it locally in the next month or so. A great deal of asparagus is grown out in western Massachusetts, I found out. It seems to be just the right climate for it out there. Ravioli will cook about 7 or 8 minutes. This is a fresh ravioli, and a package. The recipe calls for a package. I used an 8-ounce amount of ravioli. I'm going to stir it a little bit, and they are separating. I received a new pasta maker at Christmas and actually made the little raviolis with the ravioli attachment. It was my first attempt, so they are a little rough. I will get better as time goes by. And now as the nuts and garlic have become fragrant, I'm going to add 8 ounces of asparagus. And continue cooking it about 3 to 4 minutes until the asparagus is just tender crisp. The asparagus has been broken off. Each spear has a tough portion at the far end. And if you just break it off where it breaks, you'll take off the tough part. Rather than trying to cut it, it's easier just to break it, and it will break in the correct place. And I cut it in about 4 pieces for each stalk. The timing, of course, depends on whether your asparagus is really thick or really thin. But this is asparagus and walnuts, with ravioli. It's a nice, colorful spring dish. At this point, I will add our cooked raviolis. We'll get a little of the water in there, so we'll cook it a little longer to get rid of the moisture. I'm just draining them with a spoon. And some of them did stick together again. A couple more. I have all of them. I'm just going to stir these around, brown the ravioli just a little bit. I'll add it to my serving dish. And the last step would be to sprinkle it with some Parmesan cheese. And that dish is ready to be served. Now, the next thing that I want to do are a few special cookies for Easter. I love to bake cookies, and I've baked some just egg-shaped cookies. And I'm going to just frost them with this is a buttercream frosting, just back at the package from the confectioner's sugar. A little butter, a little milk, and confectioner's sugar. And I've made it fairly thin. And I'll just coat the cookies with the white frosting. I'll just do 3. I've done some more. And I will be doing a few more. But I'll do 3 for now. And then I'm going to use some colored frosting in pastry bags. And I don't have all the same size in the decorating tubes, so I use just 3 similar ones. And I'm going to put a purple stripe across. And then a blue stripe. You can decorate egg cookies. Oops, we got a little too much there. That's why we keep a paper towel handy. Eggs are fun to do. You can use purchase decorations on them. You can use different colors frosting. There's a million things you can do. Just stripes are nice. But for these, I decided to do something a little different by using a toothpick. Now, both of the frostings are still wet, and I'm just going to drag the toothpick through it to make a design. It's just a little different than a stripe, and I think they're kind of cute. So they're sugar cookies for Easter. I also did some rabbits with a rabbit cookie cutter and frosted those with the white frosting and did little decorations with purchased decorations and a little blue bow. Now let's go into the dining room and see what our table looks like for an Easter luncheon. Here I've put the things we made on the table, ready for an Easter luncheon. All we might need is a plate of ham, which would go nicely with this, and perhaps a few rolls. And we have a complete luncheon with the asparagus dish and a sweet potato dish. We're using some spring vegetables and hard-boiled eggs in different colors from nature. These are the cookies that we made for a perfect ending. Wishing you a happy Easter. I'm Liz Davey, and this has been A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable.